Welcome everybody to a special bonus Global VID podcast where we're going to talk about the differences between TV markets and film festivals. Hello, my name is Eric Lapointe, and the reason I want to explore this is that normally I interview guests and I ask for their expertise and their insight on what they do best. But I also want to create some content where I'm speaking directly to you, the new up-and-coming producer, or even the producer that is trying to shift towards another aspect of the industry. So I think it'll be important for me every once in a while to take the workshops I've built, grab some excerpts, and create some video content or podcast content where you can learn something new. And this is a rather simple concept, but what is the difference between TV and the film industry, and why are there film festivals and why are there TV markets? Well, the reason is quite simple. They are two completely different circuits with two different sets of buyers. And it may seem a little bit strange at first, but I get asked these questions even from most more experienced producers where they'll ask me, am I going to a film festival like in Cannes or in Hong Kong or wherever? And the answer actually most of the time is no. I have experimented with film festivals, but I also realized that really what I love doing best and where I was focusing my relationship building was with television broadcasters. And they're not necessarily the same people that are going to buy films. So it's really important to know that because, for example, if you have the budget to travel perhaps 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, you really want to focus in on where you're going to build your relationships in your career. And I have attended a few film festivals, but I also realized it wasn't 100% for me. Now, there is a little bit of a crossover. It's clear because, films eventually get sold to television. But if I was making a film, I wouldn't go straight to a TV distributor. I would go straight to a film distributor because the first thing that a film distributor would do would be to, pick up all of your rights in a given region, and then they would make sure that there's a theatrical distribution. Then they would consider a Blu-ray or DVD print. I still don't quite understand that in this day and age where everything is at our fingertips online. But that still exists. And then after that, you get your in-flight and your streaming and your broadcasters. So there is an overlap with the TV business, but it might be at the tail end. And the people who are buying for movies are just simply not the same people. So that's number one. Now let's take a look at the film festival side. And granted, I know a little bit less about this than I do the television markets. But what I do know is that there are over 3,000 film festivals across the globe. So you've got a lot of decisions to make. Now, it's important that I state this right now. There is a caveat here. I'm not talking about submitting your movie or your documentary for a screening. I'm talking about business-to-business networking and deciding whether or not you are going to invest upwards to $5,000 to travel and go to a film festival. So some of the bigger ones, and this is by no means the only list, but some of the bigger ones you could expect are the Cannes Film Festival in France, Berlinale in Germany, the Venice Festival in Italy, and here in North America, some of the bigger names you may have heard of, and there's quite a bit of them, but obviously many have heard of the Sundance Film Festival and the Toronto International Film Festival. But again, there's over 3,000. So the question is how do you navigate through that? And so what's important is once you look at those 3,000 is that they start to be, there's other big ones, of course, but they start to be quite niche. And they're either going to start focusing on genre or they're going to start looking on geographical regions. So genre base is the questions you may want to ask yourself is, do I have a documentary film? Do I have a scripted film, or do I have a kids animation film, for example? And then that can help you decide, kids animation, I might want to go to the Annecy Film Festival in France. If I've got a documentary, I may want to look at Hot Docs in Toronto or the Amsterdam Film Festival for documentaries. Then, if I want to take a look at things from a regional perspective, like for example, perhaps you've done quite well and you've gone to the Cannes Film Festival and you've sold content to Europe and perhaps elsewhere, but you haven't quite sold to Asia yet. Well, what are the options in Asia that are going to be significant enough for me to make sales? And for those markets, I would take a look at the Hong Kong Film Festival, which has a market integrated in it called Film Art, or I would take a look at the Busan International Film Festival, which happens in South Korea every year. And again, with 3,000 options, this is just a quick snapshot of what you could be taking a look at, but I would recommend to you to do your own research and to make up your own decisions based on the size of the event, the region the event focuses on, and of course, the genres. Now, before you start spending money and to go, let's say, overseas in Europe, I would highly recommend for you to experiment locally. And with 3,000 options available around the world, there's probably one in your town or one in the town over that would be super easy to get to. In the case of Vancouver, where I currently live, I would make it very simple and take a look at the Vancouver International Film Festival, or I may want to invest a little bit more and go to another event that's outside of town, about an hour and a half away, at the Whistler Film Festival. I actually prefer getting out of town if possible, because that would really be how you would experience the event fully. Because when you go to an event in your own town, the reality is perhaps you have to pick up your kids after school, or perhaps you have to go home at the end of the night. So you may not participate in the same way that you would if you were out of town and 100% committed to that one event. Now let's move on to the TV market circuit, which is something I'm quite frankly more familiar with than film festivals. And the good news here is there are not 3,000 options or more to choose from, but it's easier to focus on the most important ones. And the two most important ones both happen in Cannes in France. One takes place in April, the other one takes place in October, and it's run by the same organization. So in April, it's called MIP TV. MIP TV has a slightly lower attendance, which can be a good thing. It might not be a good thing to close deals, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute, but it might be a better thing to build relationships if that's what you're trying to achieve at this point in your career. Also, if you're on the scripted side, MIP TV has expanded and created sub-events like the Cannes series, which is focused on scripted content, also competing against another event in France that happens only 2 weeks before called Series Mania. And I have another video on that explains the difference between Series Mania and MIP TV. But that can be another way for you to get involved in the market. And then beyond that, there are opportunities for you to take part in the sub-events MIP formats or MIP Doc. MIPCOM in October, now this is the big show. There's more people attending. And what I would say is that this is the better market to go to if you have a lot of content to sell. Because what happens is that because it's close to year end, the broadcasters have a little bit of leftover budget. After they've committed to those major studio output deals, usually at the end of the year, there's a little bit of money left, and that's where they start to make their decisions with the independent producers and independent distributors. At least that is the case in my experience. I have closed way more deals at the MIPCOM event than I have at MIP TV, where I've always felt like I'm just kind of laying the groundwork for a future sale. So that's the big difference. Now, again, if you're going there to build relationships, it might be a little bit harder because there are so many people and everybody is hyper-focused because either you're a buyer who needs to finish up their acquisitions for the year, or you're a seller and you need to capture the attention of those buyers. So if you're looking to build relationships, you might only have a limited amount of time, one-on-one time with the people you're trying to meet. Beyond this, very similar to film festivals, the TV markets start to look at, well, is there a regional aspect to this TV market, or is there a genre aspect to this market? So genre examples would be Real Screen, Summit, which focuses on unscripted and reality TV type of shows, or Series Mania that I just mentioned before, which focuses exclusively on scripted content. It's a much smaller market, but again, more time to build relationships. And also the Kids Screen Summit, which focuses on animation and kids live action series. Now, from a regional standpoint, I would take a look at, where do you need to sell and which markets should you focus on? So for example, if you want to sell to Asia, then I would recommend the Asian Television Forum that happens in Singapore in December of every year. Whereas if you're looking to sell to Latin America, like Central America and South America, then I would take a look at markets like MIP Cancun, Rio 2C, which I just did a podcast about most recently, and even a market like NAPI Miami, where it's the gateway to Latin America. So there's a lot of options you can choose from. So again, you can do your research on your own and figure out, well, I need to grow in Africa. So now I'm going to do the research and find out which are the markets that are the most important in order for me to close deals in a market perhaps that you've never sold to before. Now, experimenting locally might be a little bit harder in this case because the reality is there aren't over 3,000 events. So you might have to go a little bit further. But again, I still recommend to experiment locally if you can, especially if you live in one of the major centers around the world. There's going to be an opportunity for you to go to an event. Here in Vancouver, there's a great factual, unscripted event called Factual West that happens in November of every year. And that even attracts broadcasters from Toronto, like actual commissioning executives that will come up to meet with producers out west. And it's got maybe an attendance of something like 200-300 people. So way better for networking and building relationships than these mega events that sometimes have over 10,000 people attending. Now, again, I would always recommend to venture outside of your cities. So the closest one is actually out of province. The closest one is the Banff World Media Festival, which takes place in June of every year. Now, this one is a little bit unique because actually it's not focused on selling existing content. It is focusing on selling new original intellectual property, or what people in this business will say is IP. So if you're selling new IP and new ideas, you want to get in front of commissioning executives, not acquisition executives, and Banff is the place for that. So depending on where you're at, Banff might be a perfect market for you to test the waters in the TV space. But again, I wouldn't go there thinking you're going to sell ready-made content, because the acquisition buyers are not necessarily attending. But if you've got new ideas, the Banff World Media Festival would be a great place to start. So I'm just going to give a quick recap of what we talked about today, the differences between TV and film, and the different markets and festivals you can go to. So number one is it should be approached as two separate circuits. I hope I made that super clear. It's two different sets of buyers. So you can drive yourself crazy and spend all the money you have in the world, and you can go to 20 events a year if you want to, but I've made a decision to focus on television. Every festival and market is unique, so do your research early to maximize opportunities. And by the way, start as early as possible. Start 2 months in advance, because the last thing you want to do is wait till the last minute to request meetings, because the answer you're going to hear is I'm fully booked. And as a new producer, you're competing against the studios who are trying to get the same meeting. And that's also where you're going to find out some opportunities that exist at each of these events that you would not find out about if you're deciding to attend an event like 2 weeks before it starts. Research the type of genre the market is focused on. right? So to make sure you're not wasting your time, does this focus on documentaries? Does this focus on scripted? We talked about that, or kids content. Choose your market or festival wisely. Is it a pitching market like the one I mentioned about Banff, where you're going there to pitch original IP? It's the same reason you might go to Kidscreen, which is a television market for the kids animation space. It's a great place to go and pitch your new IP and your new ideas to commissioning executives. Or is it a sales market where they are looking for content that has already been produced, like at MIPCOM, like at NAPI? These are the majority of the events that are there. They're really there to be like any, fruit market, if you will. And you're basically there to say, well, I've got documentaries, I've got films, and I've got television series. What would you like? And are there fellowship and mentorship programs that you can take advantage of? These get announced months in advance. This could be specific to screenwriters, showrunners, or young up-and-coming producers. They have an opportunity to take part in these fellowship programs that can really level up your career and basically be mentored while you're attending your first events. Are there regional opportunities to explore? We talked about the importance of that. So I know from experience, when I was first selling internationally, at one point I was given Africa as a territory. And I said to my bosses at the time, well, if you want me to sell to Africa, you're going to have to send me there because I have zero contacts and not enough buyers are making the trek all the way to Cannes in France. It's a very expensive market. And so some people were going to Johannesburg instead. And so I made a case to go to Johannesburg and built up some relationships and made some sales in that territory. So again, take a look at where you could maximize your sales. And if you've already maxed out those sales in Europe, then you want to start to take a look at another territory. And finally, if you can, that was the last piece of advice I had was to start out locally. Test the waters, make your mistakes by spending less money and get yourself an idea of what these events are like and get prepared for them, and then be ready for the big show, the big film festival like Cannes or Sundance, or the big TV market like MIPCOM or NAPI Miami. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments or questions for me, if the platform allows it, just drop me a comment or a question. You can also reach out to me through my website at globalvidpodcast.com. And by the way, I have a newsletter that I now put out every 2 weeks. And so I would invite everybody to sign up for that. And that way you would never miss an episode. And we also publish new bonus content that you might not have heard of otherwise through that newsletter. Thanks a lot for your time today, and we'll see you next time.